While Twitter has suspended the account of Donald Trump and most recently censored a homophobic tweet by Turkey's foreign minister, in India, the U.S. social media giant coming under scrutiny over Monday's temporary suspension of prominent accounts that support the ongoing farmers' protests against the liberalization of the sector by the government of Narendra Modi. The accounts eventually restored. Among the accounts, the Twitter putting out a statement speaking to Time magazine. It implied that it was beholden to local rules and regulations in our continuing effort to make our services available to people everywhere. If we receive a properly scoped request from an authorized entity, it may be necessary to withhold access to certain content in a particular country from time to time. Yeah, among the accounts now restored is that of the investigative news website Caravan. Independent journalist Vidya Krishnan has been a contributor to Caravan. Thank you for speaking to us from Boston.
Thank you for having me. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you. Your reaction, first of all, to Twitter's statement there, to speaking to Time magazine, which effectively points to the fact that if they hadn't temporarily suspended those accounts, they would have been liable to criminal prosecution.
I feel that Twitter has shown, especially in the US 2 weeks before, that they are capable of taking these kind of decisions based on context. And what was happening in Delhi at that point is that the government was using Twitter to crack down on dissent in such a systematic way. The legal demand that Twitter says that Modi government made actually has a gag on it. So they didn't. Caravan does not know what exactly they did wrong. The government has accused them of inciting violence against the Sikh community, which is a fantastical charge. This is entirely fact-free, but using this fact-free narrative, the government has cracked down on not just investigative journalists, but also activists and political commentators, movie stars, but most importantly, the leaders of the farmers' protest who were on Twitter. And what it does essentially is the equivalent of shutting down New Yorker or The Atlantic for covering the Black Lives Matter protest, which I feel is something that Twitter would not do, did not do in the US. So this kind of differential ethical standards for different markets is something that is coming, something that I'm beginning to question.
Yeah, because how do you explain the fact that it was first suspended, then restored, those accounts?
I feel like either Twitter India did not expect the kind of backlash, or they. I want to not look at this as something worth celebrating. The fact that they could round up 9 journalists. At last count, today morning, I know Caravan has 10 different police cases in 5 different states. So they are not even filing charges against journalists in the same state. This is a clear case of the government using big tech as well as the law at their hand to crack down on the few remaining spaces of free speech. And the fact that they restored it is difficult for me to explain, because that's a question for Twitter and Facebook, and they should be asked why they took away the accounts and then why they revoked the suspension. Where did they make the wrong decisions is something, I guess, for me to investigate or for them to put out a statement on.
I'll put the question to you a little bit differently, Vidya, because you're in the United States, where, as you mentioned at the outset, there's this sort of feeling that a reckoning is at hand over the role of social media in shaping or publishing the news. And, you know, you look back to last April, COVID-19 starts to hit in India, and there was this hashtag that trended, Corona Jihad. It appeared, according to one NGO, 165 million times in a matter of days. Today, that was sort of an implicit or dog whistle incitement to hatred at a time that somehow Muslims were to blame for COVID, this hashtag Corona Jihad. Do you think today it would still be possible to see that kind of hashtag on Twitter in India?
Of course, every day. I get death threats and rape threats every day on Twitter, Indian Twitter. In fact, to speak about the specificity of India itself deserves that attention. But since you asked me to comment on the role of big tech, this is unconstrained capitalist corporations enabling unconstrained authoritarian regimes. And how big tech is governed in the US has global implications. I feel much the same way as dismantling of the world's largest democracy will have global implications. It is already evident that even in the US, the same kind of far-right movements are organized on Twitter, on social media. And we've seen this over and over again. I've seen this in Myanmar ahead of the Rohingya genocide. This is something neither new to Facebook nor Twitter. They keep making these mistakes and they are not held to account. And more very fragile post-colonial democracies are being torn to pieces.
So where does the hope lie when it comes to who's going to regulate? Are you looking at the US? Are you looking at Europe? Or are you looking at India?
In a world that's just traumatized by coronavirus, I don't think anyone can come to save anyone else. What I would say the story here is what happened in Myanmar 4 years ago was scaled up and came to India because India did not pay attention. What happened in the Capitol Hill happened because we are not paying attention that Jack Dorsey, 6 months after the Myanmar Rohingya genocide, was on a 10-day Vipassana retreat in Burma. The same is what New York Times has done extensive investigations of how Myanmar military organized their hate on Facebook. And no one can come and save each other in this complicated world. But if we do not speak up for injustice everywhere, eventually it is going to come back and affect the worlds and the bubbles that we live in, that we consider are safe. And that, frankly, is my learning as someone who covered the crisis in Myanmar. And now I'm living to see the same thing unfold in India. And it took 4 years. So this steep decline happens pretty quickly.
Before I let you go, Vidya Krishnan, your comments on what caused this temporary suspension of accounts on Twitter, which is the farmers' protests. When it comes to those protests, days have become weeks. Weeks are now becoming months. And you still see the standoff going on. The latest on it is that in Delhi, there are these 3 protest sites. And this Tuesday, they saw that there were new security measures being put in by the authorities. Yeah, we can show those images there. Those are from earlier in the day. Your thoughts on why this is such a big standoff, what's going on between the farmers and the government of Narendra Modi?
I look at it as this being the only standoff where the Modi government finds the dissenter to be worthy because these are our farmers and India is an agrarian nation and farmers are central to Indian ethos and our laws. This is not a community you attack. And it is wrong to say that this is the biggest protest because of the protests that came before it. This is again in 2014 when the government came to power. Since then, they've taken away the constitutional autonomy of Kashmir. They have amended the citizenship to add a religious test that exclude Muslims. And they are unpopular as ever, and there are civil unrest across the country. Farmers are protesting, Indian Muslims are protesting, doctors are protesting that Ayurvedic practitioners are allowed to do medical surgeries. Students are protesting attacks on universities, and all of these protests join long-term ongoing protests in Kashmir for self-determination, against women who are gang raped in India under this government, or Dalits against caste oppression. But we do not have a media atmosphere where you can say that there are pan-national protests. So the conversation makes it seem like only the farmers are protesting. But the truth is the farmers have repeatedly said and demanded release of political prisoners, poets and professors and comedians. I mean, journalists and student leaders are in jail today. And this is the first time everyone has come together, and I frankly cannot predict. Things remain volatile in Delhi, and as the images you show, Delhi looks like a war zone right now, and I am deeply concerned at what's happening in Delhi.
Vidya Krishnan, many thanks for speaking with us from Boston.